Morality and the Trojan War by James Rashawn. The lore that surrounds the Trojan War has not only endured over and throughout time, it has grown in both myth and consequence. Why has this conflict not been allowed to dissipate into the hallowed halls of history like that of other battles from the near and distant past? The Trojan War is believed to have occurred in the 12th or 13th century before the Common Era. How does it continue to remain relevant in contemporary times? Surely there are wars of greater significance that are more befitting of this level of reverence. After all, not all scholars are even in agreement as to whether this conflict even occurred. Is it because the people that are involved? Is it the juxtaposition of an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object? Does its popularity center around the addition of supernatural beings to the struggle? Or is its lasting power all due to a giant wooden horse? Neil Gaiman, author of the contemporary mythological novel American Gods, once said, "There has never been a true war that wasn't fought between two sets of people who were certain they were in the right. The really dangerous people believe they are doing whatever they are doing solely and only because it is without question the right thing to do." A major contributing aspect to the status of the Trojan War is that one can find protagonists and antagonists on both sides of the battlefield. The people who embody these roles will often vary based on who is reading, because each individual brings with them their own personal definitions of right and wrong. The discussion about what is right and what is wrong has been a philosophical debate since humanity first developed the ability for cognitive thought. Sadly, humanity's propensity for war likely developed at the same time. Many, many moons ago, Plato stated, "It is only the dead who have seen the end of war." Those words still ring true, as war has never ceased and continues to rage on. Also continuing is the constant declarations of justification by the warring nations. Evaluating the Trojan War in this way, one can see the similarities and differences between the two eras and illuminate as to what level of evolution, or lack thereof, humankind has obtained on these subjects. For those that require clear delineation in their epics between heroes and villains, it'd be fairly easy to label the Greeks as the bad guys. After all, the Greeks are clearly the aggressors, and the Trojans fight in defense of their home. The Greeks engage in, by today's standards, morally repugnant behavior, starting with King Agamemnon's killing of his own daughter to gain favorable winds from the gods. They sack and raid cities of many islands and towns on their way to and from Troy, killing and enslaving countless inhabitants of these conquered lands. While he's a force of nature on the battlefield, the Greeks' greatest warrior, Achilles, is virtually devoid of any heroic qualities. He displays this by recusing himself from the fighting in a manner of a child throwing a tantrum because the young priestess that he claimed as a prize is taken from him, and in the disgraceful way he behaves after his victory over Hector, mutilating and degrading the body of his fallen foe. Furthermore, despite some minor successes, after 10 years of siege, the Greeks appeared to be on the losing end of this conflict, since it had been shown that they lacked the ability to take the great city of Troy in what one would consider a fair fight. The Greeks resort to deception to triumph, in the form of the Trojan horse. After gaining victory, the Greeks kill and rape with impunity, even tossing Hector's young son from the top of the wall. The inclination to paint the Trojans as the righteous party in this story likely stems not only from the deplorable actions of the Greeks, but also from Homer's depiction of Troy's prince Hector. In a story filled with, at best, morally ambiguous characters, Hector stands out as an honorable man dedicated to his love of country and family. That being said, the entire conflict would have been avoided if Troy's other prince, Paris, had not whisked away the wife of one of the Greek kings, Menelaus. All of the carnage and horrific things that occur in the Trojan War are undoubtedly the result of this action, and this gives the Greeks the justification that their chosen course is the moral one. One must give consideration to whether it is the Trojans that are the real villains, because their decision to defend Paris's immoral act with the lives of their countrymen is difficult to defend from an ethical standpoint. If the Trojan War really was fought over Helen, the woman whose face launched 1,000 ships, then we can certainly ask the questions of justice, whether ordering all that fighting and killing was truly proportionate to the problem. Brian Orrin, The Morality of War. In his book, Just and Unjust Wars, A Moral Argument with Historical Illustrations, Michael Walzer echoes Orrin's sentiments, where he describes an interaction between the two Trojan princes Hector and Paris. Hector argues that the cost of keeping Helen is far too high, and it is not worth the loss of Trojan life. Since this is a point that Paris cannot dispute, Walzer explains how Paris changes the nature of the argument. He takes it from Helen herself to the honor of the Trojan warriors, and so wins the debate, thus sealing the fate of the Trojans. It is very difficult to apply today's morality to the actions of the ancient Greeks and Trojans, because as A. A. Long states, Homeric values are the product of its needs. The values he has in mind are success in war and peace, which are taken to be commended and decreed. And values being the product of a society's needs is likely true for any group of people during any period of history. But the thoughts of Susan Neiman's also ring true. It is very hard to find a moral in the Trojan War, which is presumably the point. Any war, for any reason, leaves us wondering later why anyone thought anything could justify the misery left in its wake. Whether ignited by a bride, or an idea, or a piece of territory, every war becomes a vicious, futile trap that men should avoid from the start. The Trojan War was no more senseless than any other.